So what I'll do is briefly kind of go through what we've done today. We have two representatives from the Corps of Engineers here. We also have a representative from Nebraska Emergency Management here. We've been kind of bouncing ideas, and this is kind of what we're seeing is at the city of Scottsbluff. These are our immediate issues. This morning we met, the mayor was here, and we pretty much made a game plan that our immediate issue is that we have a lot of unusual water activity in the zoo area, which in the past hasn't been the case. Normally under our most recent in 08 and 11 and in previous high water situations, they either were real short-lived or we had groundwater situations on both sides of some of the berms and dikes, and those are all kind of manageable things. The challenge this time, besides the normal thing that we have going on with once we have groundwater coming up because of sustained river flow, is that immediately the issues, and the city's tried to kind of take a stepped approach this time, is that last week when they started having water coming up to the point that we had excess roads around the fish ponds that are east side of the zoo, started getting on the roads, then the saying that we use in emergency management is, turn around, don't drown. We don't want people driving on any kind of road surface that has water over it, because you don't know visually what that activity has caused. If you have trench, if you have cableway, if you have driving into a sinkhole, whatever it might be. So as soon as we had water going around the edges of the ponds and on around to the dog park and stuff, as those ponds, the 3 ponds became 1 pond, then it flowed out onto the road, so they shut off immediately the access to that part of the road and denied access from a safety standpoint, which is our highest priority, is safety, life safety first. And then things were kind of being monitored on a daily basis and going along, and the zoo can contest that all of a sudden the end of last week, in just a short period of time, the waters that were kind of stagnant and standing in places, which is kind of normal with a lot of this water flow with the river, all of a sudden really accelerated, started filling up the slough that's on the south side of the river, or the zoo, which we'll show you, and we'll kind of show you what we saw and seen today. As it relates to the YMCA camp and the campground, those were closed off as soon as the situation developed where, from an infrastructure standpoint, the city has to protect some infrastructure. So the YMCA camp has a lift station that brings sewage, water, bad water, up to a higher level to get it above the berms. And there's one that's also in effect, well, you could tell about it more than me. There's one, if I'm saying this wrong, tell me. There's one that brings sewage up above from the campground, and both those lower ones pump up to one that's up on the zoo complex. And so when we start having water come up in those pits, they're like 18 foot deep in some cases.
Yes.
So groundwater quickly affects those and starts to float those sewage or those lift stations up, and if those get damaged, it can be to the tune of like $200,000 of damage to the infrastructure. So they have to shut that sewer off. And in previous floods, we also had problems with electricals and different things like that. Some of those have been remedied as far as like in the zoo area and stuff where they went above ground with a lot of stuff that used to be buried. So I think the city's been trying to take some incremental steps. So what we learned from one situation and maybe try to proactively get ready for the next situation. So those lower lift stations were shut off at some point. Was it the latter part of last week?
Yeah, it was actually the first part of Monday, I should say.
Okay, so we held those off as long as we could. I was gone for 5 days, so I'm kind of playing catch up here. Those lift stations were shut off. Now both those lower lift stations lift and go up to the zoo, and you're monitoring the zoo one right now.
Yeah, we're trying to give them relief as much as we can at the zoo.
And what that lift station does at the zoo is it takes it up to another level to get it up to the sewer level that the rest of the city naturally drains and goes to the mediation ponds and everything for the city's sewer system. So since those two areas, one that's kind of mediocrely low, the zoo, one that's really low down by the river, they have to kind of stair step them up to get them up to the sewer. So that's the infrastructure side, that once you start shutting off sewer capabilities and or water capabilities, and in some cases electric capabilities, then that makes it a safety hazard from a response standpoint to those areas. So right now, they had shut off the main road to stop any access into those areas, and it's all being monitored. And in talking with Dean from the Y, really the groundwater this time is less than what it was the previous floods and stuff. The natural seepage of the water that comes up on the lower side of a berm here and on the upper side of the berm, just the The rivers it gets, that's all sandy ground and soil, it's gonna naturally surcharge and bring up groundwater, so you're gonna see puddles in different areas. But as far as major risk to any of the major infrastructure at the Y, it's all nice and dry, for the most part that I could see, unless there's something I didn't see. Previous floods, we had water actually gaining momentum and going up towards some of their infrastructures, and it's down a lot lower, at least to this point, than it has been in previous times. And so the immediate situation we had this morning that the mayor wanted us to address, it was all the surprise water that all of a sudden in just a couple days started surcharging way up above both of these berms and up into the zoo area. So this is kind of an overhead picture of the site down there. So to orientate yourself, this is the old zoo entrance used to be right here, now it's been moved to here. So this is an older Google map. So the main entrance into all these complexes is right here now. These fishing ponds, where there's usually 3 of them, or one big one, and there's flood water that's across a number of places in the road, relatively deep. And when the water gets to this slough, what we're thinking is transpiring in our observations today, it probably excelled all of this water getting up here so high and migrating, is that there seems to be a lot more activity here on this riverbank than used to be with the high waters, and some of these sandbars that you see along here have either deteriorated or totally washed out. And so a lot of this bank that used to be here that kept the water in its channel, or the river in its channel, has migrated into a lower area here that's kind of called a marsh or a swamp area. So this would be right on this south beltline curve here. This is a low area out here, and if you drive by there, you're going to see a lot of water, standing water out here, and moving water that's not normally there. So what our interpretation is so far is that we have a lot of breach that's taken place, and so since these are low areas and it got out of the banks of the river, when the river gets high, it naturally goes laterally. And so it's went laterally into this area, and what it's done is get up against the berm that's on the west side of these ponds. And so there is a entrance point here that is a culvert that's approximately a 48-inch culvert that as the water's raised up into this area, it's sending a lot of water under a lot of pressure into these ponds. So normally these ponds that are in the zoo and here and in the fishing ponds, normally they go up and down just the groundwater is their primary point of filling and stuff. It's not like they're got well water or something pumping, it's usually groundwater. So what's happening here is it's normally these are going to be just groundwater in effect with the rivers that goes up and down. But what we have now, since there's a lot of new water introduced into here, into that pooling area, it's sending a lot of water into that pipe. It's going under force with a lot of force, like rapid type force, into that pond. And as it's raising the level of that pond and sending a lot of water across that pond, it's getting over to the east side. On the east side, there's 2 points here of exit for that water. One is there's a little culvert right here that kind of dumps it into the upper part here and makes it way back to this slough that goes along the zoo. And then there's another entrance over here that's a culvert back here that comes into that slough. And so normally this is a real quiet little slough. It's just a little tiny ditch that has nice little water migrating through it and some wildlife and some reeds and stuff and not too much activity. Well, as this lake has swelled up and it's come clear out into this area here, to orientate yourself, this is the Kiwanis campground, and the disc golf course is scattered all over. All of this area back here is all underwater to the point of like 3 foot, 4 foot deep in places. So these 2 exit points for that water are having so much water coming at them that it's surcharged this ravine here. This is just normally a quiet little slough that goes through the edge of the zoo and goes on out and migrates out. Well, it's filled up and now it's migrating both directions. So the zoo's having a lot of water that's starting to come up to all their exhibits. So far it's in the dirt areas and fence areas and not up to the infrastructure. When the zoo was remodeled a number of years ago, they actually put a lot of the buildings and everything up towards a 100-year flood mark and elevated a lot of their structures. And so that part of it is pretty safe, but it started to inundate all of the lower areas and some of the exhibit areas and stuff to the point of between the new building that was built here that has the inside exhibits and the bison thing. This is all water now flowing all the way over and filling up these ponds here. So the ponds that are at the zoo that you usually walk across that rock bridge there and look at the fish and the wildlife and the swans and everything, those ponds are filling up. There's also going to be a certain amount of water that comes from Westmore. There's a stormwater drain that comes and goes into that area too. So this water's flowing into those ponds and filling them up. Now, the way the water normally gets out of those is because usually there's not much water coming in, and so your inflow and your outflow is handleable as far as being pretty even. So there's a small little culvert here that's right below the Buffalo exhibit. This is the dirt road that you go down to go to the campground and to go to the YMCA complex. There's two culverts. One is at the end of the ponds here for the lake where the ducks and the geese and the swans are. So there's a culvert here that has some water flowing through it, and there's a culvert here that's at the other side of the Buffalo exhibit that has water flowing through it, and it dumps into an additional ravine. You can see the dark green there that heads over towards the fish ponds. Now, this is backed up so much from it not flowing good right here and not getting to the level flowing well enough or quick enough out into the fish ponds that it's started backing up, and so we have standing water on this dirt road here that usually that's bone dry. We have standing water that's a foot to foot and a half deep. We have water in probably 2/3 of the campground that's up to the bottom of picnic table seats, so substantial amount of water. This arboretum here between the Kiwanis camp and the campground has standing water, and it's getting more and more and migrating. Here you can kind of see the lines that were drawn by our guest here and migrating that direction to the low spots. So we're not really seeing a lot of activity south of this berm. The berm that comes along here, this is the concrete pathway along the edge of the thing. So if you walk the pathway and you get to the end, concrete stops right there, where it was one time going to go across the river and then got stopped. So that's the concrete elevated berm, and then it drops down and does the rest of the pathway along the river, which has a lot of flooded out spots, a lot of washed out. We're going to have to examine that later on as far as what the infrastructure damage is anytime the pathway was attacked by the river and the banks that are sloughing and coming off of the river. But the elevated berm kind of jumps up here and comes along and separates. So here's the Quanah thing, the raised berm. It comes around and around the side of the RV camp and goes up here. The water that's normally on each side of that berm is just groundwater, and we don't have a lot of groundwater. There's some between the road going back to the Y in this area. There's some on the north side of it. The last flood we actually had a lot of active water that was standing water on top of that because it surcharged up enough that it made one big lake there, or a shallow lake there. We're pretty much dry all the way here except for a few places. There's water on the north side of the Y parking lot there and starting to come out into their parking lot, but all their infrastructure is looking pretty good with the exception of the sewer pumps that we had to shut off to protect the infrastructure. So we're not having any at this point in time anyway. All of that looks pretty solid. All the banks, berms that are designed on the river here on the big curve where they used to dump the ducks, the duck races, are all holding nice and solid. We've been on those yesterday and today and are holding pretty solid. The Y was down there just today, right at that point there. So we're looking pretty good on the berm side, but our immediate concern is that we've got so much water that's not normally here. And they can even show you historically what's been there in past events and what's kind of changed as it relates to the dry seasons and the wet seasons and some of the changes that have taken place that might have an effect long term on some of this. But our issue that we're dealing right with now is that we have a lot of water coming into the point right here, and it's coming in faster than these areas that normally drain it can relieve it. Once it gets past this road here that's flooded, in that low area here, there's a large 48-inch pipe here. It actually has a flapper valve on the downhill side of it. It's got really good water flowing through it, so the water that's making it to this ravine is flowing pretty good. We have water that's standing pretty high here in the campgrounds. It's trying to get to those lower elevations there, so we might even be doing some mediation of trying to cut some paths wherever we find the lowest spot is and see if we can relieve some of that standing water. But our immediate thing we're looking at right now is trying to do something at that 48-inch culvert at the top end of it. We feel that if we can get the water flow stopped, then that's going to residually start trying to help take care of itself, and these things might catch up. If they don't look like they're going to catch up, we've looked at trying to see if we can mediate. There are approximately 36-inch concrete culverts here, and they've got decent flow on the back side, but not what's visible of a lot of flow on the other side. There's a lot of standing debris and lumber and stuff, and so we can't really tell what the activity is there. Those are inside fenced areas and kind of hard to get to, so rather than mess with that culvert, if we start doing something to try to relieve, since this is a dirt road, the simple thing for the city of Scottsbluff to do is probably to come in here and just trench wherever the two lowest spots are. Is beside the culvert is just a trench, an open trench, and get it so it's a lot deeper than the water that's standing here and the water that's trying to get out here, and naturally let that flow. Once it gets back down to normal situation, then it's real easy to go back and temporarily refill that area. And maybe to that point, if the river started being better or things have changed, and we'll have Tim talk about the river flows, then maybe certain sections of things can be systematically opened back up. That's kind of long-term, we just have to see. But our immediate concern is to get this out so it quits surcharging this area, putting infrastructure and animals at risk here, and also filling up these ponds, which in turn might slow down some of the migration of the river or the water that comes out of the Westmore Addition. The Westmore Addition, as the groundwater goes up, then those basements naturally get some water coming up, and their instructions is that they can't put that water into the storm or into the sewer, they have to put it to the storm drain. So you go in that area and they do have water in the basements, they have pipes coming up, I believe, correct?
Yep, sump pumps.
Some pumps that send the water up to their driveways and down to the storm drains, and the storm drains naturally bring it in up from the north and into these ponds, and it migrates out normally. But since all this is backing up and filling up because of all that new challenge of water coming in, our feeling from the city, and when we had discussions with the Corps, we had discussions with NEMA, that are we looking at this wrong, or this is something new to us, we haven't seen this kind of activity, but we also haven't seen all that activity of all the water on the other side. We had MC Shaft here and had some of the original designers back in '71 that built this berm and stuff, and they said they've never seen water on the north side of this other than just groundwater. So what we're getting is all that due flow coming in here below the zoo, between the zoo and these areas here, and then that's backing up, and at some point that might get to the point where it causes some damage to that berm. So we want to try to relieve that pressure as quickly and as effectively as we can. So our feeling is that we get the water shut off coming from the west, and then on the east side try to help mitigate a new, better flow of water coming out, so all of this will naturally go to its natural place here in the green. Then it'll get on over to this 40-inch pipe, which is already flowing water good. The second pipe has about 10 inches of water, but it's staying pretty stagnant and flat. So it might be such a thing, if we start getting a lot of water back into this, it might even actually get to that second one. Maybe, maybe not, we don't really know. It's up fairly high. It appears to be more of a catastrophic overflow pipe, so that if all of a sudden we got a bunch of flooding in here really bad, that we would have a second exit point to get to the river. Because once it gets to these fish ponds, the elevation wise between this area on the berm and this side, this is a lot lower. So what it's doing right now, as it's filled up and made this one big lake, is it's coming across the road here. If you're familiar with down there where they do like the Christmas tree storage and the mulch piles and stuff like that, it's coming across there and getting over to the edge of the Olex berm and going right back into the river. So we feel that if we can get this assisted and help Mother Nature and help the natural flow get it over to the ponds, then the fish ponds, as they fill up, will keep on dumping at a faster rate back into the river. So it has bypassing the zoo issue and bypassing the Y and stuff, because we don't want to do any more surcharging to that ground any more than naturally is going to take place with the river. So right now what's taking place is we've sent engineers and Public Works Director down to this location right here, and there's an access point here off the bypass where they can go straight down with a solid road to that pipe point, and they're looking at options of trying to either berm behind it, put plywood behind it, sandbags, rocks, whatever. That's up to the people with a lot of initials behind their names. But they're going to try to stop the flow or slow down or stop the flow here, which we think in turn will take care of all these secondary issues that are escalating because of that flow. There's a lot of water coming through here because of all the standing water. It keeps getting deeper and deeper here because of the river finding nice new little low spots with the height to go. Water's going to go to the lowest point no matter what happens. So we think that if we do that, and if we have to, there's a couple little culverts down here where the blue lines are, and those are small ones, and they're flowing water, but not a lot of water. So if we have to, that's dirt road too, and the city's property kind of goes all the way to the river right here. They'll go down, and if it looks like it's not flowing out of there good enough, we even have an option of cuttings through the dirt road here and trying to relieve. Right now the water's coming in, some of it's going up there and some of it's getting right there and turning right around and coming back to the river. So our thought is that if we stop that flow there and get rid of that low point, then it's just going to naturally find its low spots and come out. But if we have to assist it here, and wherever the low spots are, it's already getting soggy in a few places here, so we know that there's water infiltration there. that we can get it over here, and the berm's nice and solid up here where the pathway is, and the turn for the Y is way down here. We have some water back in here where the Y has like a camp ring and different things that they do some of the activities with, but there's no structural buildings or anything in this area. So if there is some rerouted river flow temporarily with high river levels and it goes into this area, it's not a big danger concern from infrastructure as far as buildings or infrastructure for the city, because all that's down on the other side of the big river berm down here. Said a lot of stuff there pretty fast. This is just a Google Earth picture, so this is no way a current map satellite picture. We're not quite that high tech here, but at least kind of gives you an overall visual of what we're looking at. This was the old cement plant that's that the city bought these ponds from them so they could do secondary containment for EPA standpoint for water discharges to the river. So, is there any questions as it relates just to the Riverside Zoo and kind of what we saw and what we're proposing, or anything? Yes?
You probably don't have the answer, and that's okay, but as far as a timeline for those potential solutions, what are you thinking on that?
We got the capability on site right now that if the engineers and the public works director say, yeah, we think we can do this, and if we slow down the water, then we'll go and see if we can relieve on the downward side. The city has capabilities equipment-wise and stuff with backhoes, loaders, dump trucks, sand trucks, whatever needs to happen, of doing that in pretty short order. He's already put some of his crews on point. So it's mainly making sure that the engineers feel, yeah, we think that that's going to be a logical thing. There is some concerns when you start trying to stop water flow coming through a big pipe like that, of what you put there, is it actually going to do it? Is it still going to get around it? If you dump a product in there and moving water, and it dissipates faster than you can get it to put pressure on the board. So there's some caveats there that they're going to have to work with. Normally, if you had a dry situation, you would put plastic and boards and sandbags and properly do it and properly slope it with the weight and everything, so when the water hit it, that it wouldn't wash it away. But when you're talking about water that's actively moving and you're trying to interrupt that flow, then they're going to have to put their think hats together and say, well, maybe we need to build a berm farther away and kind of get the water dropped down on that level and then put a board in place. And they've got the equipment to do that. So generally the way most of these things work is that all emergencies are local emergency. Our emergency manager would tell you that. And so the locals try to deal with it as best they can. If they have the resources, have the equipment, have the things to do it, then they start there. And if we exhaust our resources or exhaust our capabilities, then we start looking to the state. So then we start looking to emergency management. We've already declared a disaster for this situation. So we've already opened up some purse strings and stuff, and NEMA's online with us as far as what we're doing. They've actually dispatched Corps of Engineers and one of their staff members here to kind of help us coordinate with what our thought process is. But if we would exhaust all of our resources and say it's just overwhelming us, or it's happening too fast, or what we did didn't work, then we can start calling on the state resources and the governor and the Emergency Act Fund, and the governor can authorize through NEMA to disperse more resources, whether that be Corps of Engineers, whether it be other branches of the federal government or state government or National Guard or whatever it might be. So it's kind of a stepped process, but ideally most emergencies are local and are handled locally, and that's why I'm here talking. And if it exceeds our capabilities, our resources, and that's when we start saying, Mr. Governor, we need some help here, can you help us out? We've already put things in place with the emergency declaration that's already been signed by the mayor, so that if we have to get to that level, that they're well aware of what's going on. They've already got the state EOC up and running as far as their point of contacts and aware of what's going on here, along with all the other places across the state that are getting all this water. It just doesn't stop in Scottsbluff. It all goes downstream. So McConaughey's almost clear full, and their Platte's got flooding, everything in between here and there, everything beyond there. So so far we're dealing with what we have as best as we can, and trying to keep it from not affecting any of the people. Our life safety is the first thing, infrastructure after that, and we are very sympathetic at the city of Scottsbluff. I'll speak unofficially for the mayor since he's not here, is that we're very sensitive to the fact that we have Our campground was booked for the whole summer solid, and the zoo is during your prime season and having lots of activities that aren't taking place now. The YMCA camp is booked, I'm sure, solid all summer long with weddings and reunions and class reunions and family reunions and everything. Great complex down there, so we want to try to mitigate things in a productive manner so that we can get back to some safe level of saying, yeah, it's safe now to do this or do that, and if things drop down where Lynn is in charge of all the water stuff and he says wastewater is that, okay, we're feeling pretty comfortable here, we're going to go ahead and bring these sump pumps back online and monitor them daily, then that's his call there, and hopefully we can get to the point progressively. We're doing that right now with the zoo, and if we can get some of this level relieved, then maybe that'll help, maybe it won't. Maybe the groundwater will just keep on coming up where it'll have a long-term effect, maybe meaning weeks or beyond. So we kind of have to play a certain amount with Mother Nature here. You've all seen the weather forecast, that we've got rain forecasted for a lot of evenings. So everywhere it rains, even if it doesn't rain right on Scottsbluff Union, if it rains upstream, we eventually get that here. We've got some situations going on with, Tim will address those as far as irrigation ditches and stuff that some have been taking water, some haven't been taking water. It's not the irrigation season yet, so you know we're trying to work with some of them that can relieve water into their systems and get them past Scottsbluff Union and some of the immediate towns here, and they dump back in downstream quite a ways past some of the life safety issues. So we're trying to work with that. Tim can tell you a little bit more as far as some of the dams and releases and stuff there. But as it relates to our immediate situation, we're going to try to immediately try to see if we can stop the flow coming into the slough or ravine or whatever terminology you want to use. And then if it's not seen, it might be that if we stop that flow, we start seeing a pretty noticeable increase, that it's catching up, just like when you pull the drain on your bathtub. It takes a little while for it to start siphoning and going. We might start seeing some relief. If not, we have some temporary things we can do that are very inexpensive and quickly done. I would be a better appropriate thing to say, can quickly be done to mediate maybe trying to get water on going downstream. So that's kind of our game plan to this point, is to try to address it as aggressively as we can and try to relieve some of this new surprise that we haven't dealt with at the previous situations in the last few high water events.
I'd just like to add that a member of the National Animal Group is being inconvenienced. The bison has been declared the national animal of the United States, and he's not happy because of this water. So, all right, that's straight from the White House.
Give him our best.
We did check our emergency response equipment, and we couldn't find a life jacket big enough to
I know.
the bison, so I guess you'll have to kind of make some steps.
I know, we were thinking of doing, never mind swimming with the dolphins, swim with the bison, but you know, swimming trunks and one of those little rubber lifeguard helmets.
If there's no more questions for me, then I'll turn this over to our emergency management person,
Hello.
Tim Newman.
Before you leave, if I could get a copy of that map to send to ACA, because they want us to look at solutions to the problem, and I could show them that the city, you know, took immediate action and.
Yeah. And we've got some that have been produced that are kind of glowed up things, so we can get
Okay.
together with Tim and he can bring you whatever, you want an overall one, if you want to
That'd be
focus in just on the
perfect.
zoo, we can, anything you see there, we can bring.
That would
Right,
be
yeah.
perfect.
But
Thank you.
I just want to say that we put these stick pins on here this afternoon. We didn't cross-check the locations, because, you know, we took coordinates when we were out there, but this was just roughed in 45 minutes.
It
So-
looks about right though.
It's probably right,
Yeah.
but you need to consider a draft, and if there's a way to put a draft label on there, that would be best. Don't let that, whoever gets it, don't let it say, yeah, this is official, because it's
Yeah,
it's
no.
not.
We haven't
No, that we
confirmed
can
any of
make
these
that.
sizes, we stood over and said, that looks like about 48 inches.
Yeah.
So, you know, we
No,
haven't
that's
confirmed
fine.
any of these things, so long-term, there'll be a lot better probably solution as they look in there and the water levels drop and they say, okay, what can we do to improve this or to increase it or be able to shut off the flows or open the flows, and so all those things.
Dan, so that's the plan then, is to try to close off that culvert that is draining that swampy area there to the west?
Correct.
And hoping that the water goes across that old pathway
Yeah, where that's
area
still-
there, or are you gonna try to cut, are they gonna try to cut that out
If
too?
they actively see that it's, can't escape anymore to the east into the ponds there, and starts flowing south, then they'll probably leave it alone. If it looks like it's still having a hard time getting over to the main water flow down by that snow fence, then they can go ahead and cut something there where those two pipes are trying to do it. You can see the swirl activity, but they appear to be pretty small in nature. They can cut a trench there too to try to help mitigate getting that over to gaining its way back to the river channel.
Okay.
Is kind of the concept. We'll be able, if they can successfully get that block, that 48-inch opening, we're probably in pretty short nature going to find out if it's to start going up or if it's going to go ahead. Logic would say it's going to flow south and go to the river. Everything heads to the river eventually, but if we need to help mediate that, it would be pretty easy for them, even if they have to take a smaller piece of equipment down in there and dig a trench there right where that snow fence is and help get it across where that soggy road is that we were on this morning.
Do you think in the future you'd try to, a solution of stabilize those compromised river banks that kind of, diverted that water into that slough in the beginning, or to begin with?
Well, that's
Or
kind
is
of a
that
long-term
just-
question.
Right.
And the challenge, and I'm sure they would tell you, is that when you start, first you have to get permission to do anything that affects river flow and the river banks and stuff. So as rivers get high, then the potential is always there that it starts washing things away. Some of the long-term solutions years ago that were done that you can still see visible reflex of is that car bodies and stuff that are embedded along the rivers. You're seeing some of those ponds there. And that used to be we'll stick stuff there that won't real quickly wash away. Now those are all rusted and deteriorating and falling apart. We've been trying to remove them. Aesthetically, they look terrible and they don't serve as probably as good a function as what they thought they were going to. So what you see in some of the areas where they build up there west of the Y is a lot of riprap and real heavy, so that it doesn't have a chance to get to dirt and infrastructure that can readily be washed away. So long term, I guess the answer to your question is that when a river comes up, it's going to find its least path of resistance. And so one year when the river's high, this bank holds, and the next time the river comes up and maybe the channel has changed from the east side or the south side to the north side, and there's more current flowing there, and it takes out the bank. So it's an ongoing challenge. We have that going on with the pathway. Every time we get high water, is that there'll be sloughing in bank. Public Works Director saying he's already examined quite a bit of the river bank that's really being affected this year. And as you have sustained high water and fast-moving water in just a short period of time, it can remove a lot of earth and a lot of bank really fast. Sometimes those are easily remedied and sometimes not. But when you get involved in some of that and trying to redirect Mother Nature in the river, sometimes it's an easy thing and sometimes not. And sometimes you have to go through the steps as far as making sure that what you do isn't going to create more of a problem, rather than you might eliminate right here, but now all of a sudden you cause more water somewhere else to pull up and you've caused problems for somebody else. So long-term wise, and I'm far from an expert, but what I've seen is that they try to address as best they can, but they want to make sure they kind of have a game plan so what they do doesn't create more harm than good when you start messing with the river, because that's a lot of force happening down there. You can see that water moving, and if you've ever been whitewater rafting or anything, you get a feel of how fast and how much power there is there. So, any other questions for me? Okay.
Well, I guess one more thing. Was there any conversation when you visited with the mayor about some type of a long-range plan, particularly where they changed the entrance and they're going to, the eventual plan, as I understand it, the extension of the pathway was going to come down the old road past the Discovery building out to the highway and then off to the north, routing all of that traffic to the east around those ponds. And that was my question to the city manager at that time. What if we get high water again? And here we are.
That's being discussed, but right now, we're just looking at short term.
Well, and I
Trying to get this
understand that, but
resolved.
there has got to be, and I know you're not the guy to answer that, but there has got to be
Yep.
some kind of a long-range plan to fix that road and fix it right, so that if we do, even if we get a medium high water year, it affects that road. And then and these guys are high, and they can, the Discovery Center, they can still get to their building for now, but it's the groundwater issue.
Yeah.
But as far as to the campground, to the RV park, and to the Y camp, you're SOL.
I know that there is discussion taking place, and that they formulated, I think, some initial steps. That's the reason for that new entrance there, and all the infrastructure that was built on each side of the road there, and the concrete and the ramps and the approaches and connecting onto the other street there. So they're systematically approaching that. I don't know I haven't been real up to speed as far as the rest of the pathway project and how it's gonna migrate to the west side of town and stuff there. I know the original discussion was just to follow some of the natural things, but they might be taking a look at that and saying, well, long-term wise, is that the best thing? The mayor's discussion this morning was, his immediate concern was to try to relieve the issue with the zoo and take a solid look with Tim as it relates to how long are they telling us that we're gonna be dealing with this high water, and if there's things that we can do systematically to help deal with that, and then long-term as far as trying to go in and address the issues that would be of concern to the zoo, or to the Y, or the campground, because that affects everybody. It
Right.
affects the city's revenues from the campground, and your revenues, and your revenues, so it affects everybody. And my standpoint, I'm concerned about life safety, and so the more that we can mitigate and not have water coming up in areas where we might have a life safety issue and have to rescue people or evacuate people, then I'm selfish, but that's my immediate concern.
Sure.
Long-term wise, infrastructure wise, I think the city, through all of their expertise and through using the city engineers and the other capabilities we have of trying to look at some long-term things and do things in a progressive pattern so that you're not eliminating this problem and causing a secondary problem. And your discussion might be one of those things, but that would be a good thing as far as through maybe Parks and Recs that is doing the pathway project, so with Perry and our new city manager and everything, and the mayor with infrastructure plans and long-term planning as far as making sure they progressively take some of these new findings that we're running into account. Okay, we have Mr. Tim Newman here, which is, he's got so much information leaking out of his ears, it's just amazing.
You're so funny. I really don't have much to add. Right now, water out of Guernsey Dam is coming out at around 5,000 cubic feet per second. Grey Rocks Dam on the Laramie River is down to 3,900 as of yesterday, and their flows are continually slowly dropping because their inflows are starting to drop. They are now at bank full, which they were 3 feet above bank full just a couple weeks ago. So they relieved a lot of water out of those dams, but we've got a gigantic snowpack, and they're going to need a lot of room. Right now, coming across the state line at Henry is about 7,500 cubic feet per second, but that is supposed to increase some in the morning. The interstate canal is going to be closing. They have been taking out 1,100 cubic feet per second at Wayland. That's going to be closing, so that's going to create a little bit of a problem. But on the plus side, we've got some other smaller canals that are going to start coming online and taking water out. So the net gain won't be 1,100. I believe they said about 600 might be, what we can expect to be past all of those canals. So really, we're going to be at that level. Their projections are through the end of June, we're going to be at high levels, and probably into July. I didn't see any decrease when they got to June 30th. It didn't say, okay, we're going to shut it off now. It was 5,000, 600,000, 7,000 cubic feet per second coming out of there. And I guess the good thing is that as we get on into the summer, then the canals will start taking more water because they'll need it for irrigation. But the long-range forecasts are that we're going to be in an above average moisture and below average temperatures for the next 30 to 60 days. I don't know what else to say. We've talked about where we would like to block flow, divert flow, and maybe create some pathways for this water to get out of here. But we're still gonna have groundwater. Even if we got all of the flowing water out, we're gonna have groundwater because the river levels are gonna be at or above what they are now for the foreseeable future. So even if we got all of the flowing water stopped and drained it out, we're still gonna have to worry about the groundwater situation. So I know I'm a little ray of sunshine, but
We have had some discussions as it relates to pumps and stuff, that questions came up. And you're never gonna out-pump a river. So if you have a lot of groundwater, what you pull out's gonna replace. Now, if it's water that's set there and trapped, then we can, in new places, then we might have some success there. We've checked in, Terrytown has a fairly large pump they use when they have water into their lower areas there in Terrytown. City has some real small capabilities, but from the fire department, I can tell you, you can't stay ahead of a river. So if it's some standing water that's not supposed to be there and not going to be instantly replaced, then we could put some pumps in place to try to relieve. But we think that the more naturally that we can just help assist it, taking its natural flow through that ravine, getting it to a lower level in the fish ponds and back to the river, then that's the best course of action that we've got. That you could pump and pump and pump and you would never see anything as it relates to that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of that inundation water, if the inflow is stopped, it'll go away with it. You know, it won't take that long, I don't think, a day or two, and it'll go back to normal groundwater
Saw how
levels.
fast it came up, so in theory,
Yeah.
you're not going to have as quick of outlet maybe as the inlet was, but it will.
It'll be I mean,
You
a couple
should
of
be able to see
days.
results.
Yeah.
They're
So I
gonna-
mean,
they're gonna plug that inflow tomorrow morning.
great.
So
Yeah.
they'll get that done tomorrow morning, and then they're gonna start pumping that water back.
Yeah.
As
And
as
if
soon
the
as they
river-
get that inflow.
Yeah, if the river doesn't come up
stabilized.
too much, I mean, we were coping with the groundwater levels fine, we were open to the public. It was only when this inundation occurred that
Right.
we had the real problem. So if we can go back down to normal, normal elevated groundwater levels, we'll be okay. And it's going to take us a while to put all the animals back and clean up and stuff. So that's really okay. If we've got a big puddle that just will not go away, we'll give you a call. But
I don't think there's a huge groundwater issue right
no,
now. Because
no, there isn't.
the Y would be underwater like it was in 2011, right? Dean, you guys had a lot of groundwater?
No, actually, it's the groundwater, it's the lift station. Our deal boils down to the lift
Yeah,
station.
that's your
Yeah.
problem. Yeah.
Right.
Because we can't operate without,
The lift station.
we can't operate with porta potties. I mean, you got families out there, you gotta have shower facilities.
But what I'm saying is, we don't have the groundwater out there right now that we have in the past.
No, it's actually lower on our
Yes.
grassed area than it was in 2011.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we can deal with that. Once this influx goes away,
Yeah.
we'll be okay. I mean, yeah, you're still gonna have a
But,
problem.
yeah, like I said, you can dry up the surface water, but
Yeah.
the groundwater is gonna be what it is. And
Yeah.
until it gets to the level where Lynn says we can fire those lift stations up again, then,
Because literally up until Friday or Saturday, last Friday and Saturday, groundwater levels hadn't risen
No?
Right.
Immensely.
Well, actually,
And
they
so we
went
were,
down on
we were
Friday,
comfortable
didn't they?
with everything to go on, yeah,
Yeah.
we dropped about a half inch on Friday, and Saturday just, it all came up
Yeah.
real quick. Sunday morning, we were shutting things down because we had way too much water.
how much leeway is there, or maybe you can't tell me off the top of your head, as far as the Wise lift station there? As far as, where it was on Friday compared to where it was on Sunday morning when we shut everything down?
Well, we literally had water flowing around the lift station at that time, because it was coming over the banks of those lakes to the north, so, if we can get that slowed up and stopped, then I don't think we're gonna have a real
So there
big
might be a
problem.
possibility then we could fire that back up.
Yeah, and, if we have it corrected, we're talking a couple hours, we'll be back and running. It's not a big issue, so,
Right.
as far as getting everything back up there going.
We have to mediate that water on the road getting down to you.
Well, yeah, and the
So
road
that'll be
issue,
the secondary issue.
because that's what's different from my perspective compared to 2011.
Correct.
There was not that much water. In fact, that road was all dry. It was until you
Right.
got just right to the camp entrance where it was running across the road. But there was never that much water there in
As it
11.
relates to the city, I'm sure we're gonna have some infrastructure issues with the campground, because now a lot of that infrastructure's been underwater.
Yeah, it became
So-
inundated, so
so we're gonna have
I think
to
we're gonna be
variance
okay
of-
as far as the station goes. I don't know what what's happening to the actual
Yeah.
collection lines underneath there, underneath the
Collection
culvert.
line, electrical, and everything that's
Correct.
down there, so that might be, I mean, they'll address that as they have to. Maybe it's a dry camp type thing and porta potties or whatever. But we're trying to keep marching along in a nice progressive manner as safely as we can.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's, when you're dealing with Mother Nature, you only have little or none in control. And we just have to hopefully do the best we can. And hopefully this, walking that thing off will reroute that to where, maybe we'll get some of that relief. We could get going again.
I would really like to thank the city and Tim Newman for your quick response.
Yeah,
And this is extraordinary. And we really are very, very appreciative. We appreciate the Corps coming out, saving the day. You guys are knights in shining armor. So thank you very much.
We treated them some Western Nebraska beef sandwiches at Co-op for $2 for beef sandwich and chips and a drink, so
They
they were
were
pretty
cheap,
tickled.
huh?
They were pretty tickled that they got $2 meals.
Better than MREs, I'm sure, anyway.
The river level, this morning, it was 8.87 at Mitchell. It's forecasted to go up to 9.3, which is actually lower than the first forecast, about a couple weeks ago when they said it was gonna get to 9.4. So when they said that, we only got to 9.1, I think is the closest we got. Now they're talking about 9.3 and what they're forecasting is because of Interstate Canal shutting off.
And Tim, didn't we get to 9.68 last year? Was it
Last year,
No,
Or
That was in
2011?
that was 2011.
2011, okay.
yeah, 9.68 was
2011.
2011. And last year is when they said, oh, you're gonna get to 10.2, or 10.3, it's gonna be a new world record, and it didn't happen. If we get 9.3, then we can probably expect, a several inch rise from what we've got now. But maybe it won't be as bad as they predicted. And,
Tim, you alluded to that there would be increased flows in the future with the snowpack and everything that it's got to go somewhere. Have they given you any indication of planned increases in the release rate?
Yeah, what they've given us is a big spreadsheet for the entire river system all the way up to the mountain. Every dam, what their inflow and outflow is expected to be all the way through the end of June. So they're starting up in the high country, and they'll release more there, and then they'll back their releases off as they make room, and then the second dam will take on more, and they'll have to release more, and they're going to step stone that water down. And
So the 1,100 that you were talking about, that's just initially what we can expect just immediately?
well, they're in the process now of shutting the interstate canal down. So they are starting today, and by 8 a.m. it should be down to zero. So they're going to step it down like every hour. They're going to step down 100 CFS until that's shut down. And at the same time, though, we've got other canals that are now taking water, which is probably why we've seen like a 3-inch drop here in the city since Friday. So we've got other canals coming online as they're going offline. And then, in a few weeks, when they have more demand for irrigation, they'll reopen that canal as well. So when they do that, though, the dams upstream are going to see that we're losing water out here, which we would love to do, but they're going to increase their flows in order to continue to keep water, keep space available for that snow melt. So it's a balancing act, it's a juggling act, and, the Bureau of Reclamation and Corps probably have more answers on all that than I do. I've just got, what information they've given me and what I can decipher in my mind what they're trying to tell me. You guys have anything that you'd like to add? Of course you don't.
Wise man.
Looks like you covered everything, so.
Well, we really appreciate you coming out.
Glad to be here.
We saw you got draft imprinted on your files there.